Tall bearded irises make a beautiful sight in the summer border, but every so often they need lifting and dividing, as you can see with the clump there. So let's get cracking. The advice is to lift and divide the clumps immediately after flowering. Well, that gives you a window of July to August in the UK. What they want is the ground in the right condition. As you can see, this is quite dry. I've done it deliberately, waited for a dry spell. You can see the roots are all crowded together, overshadowing each other. And the one thing that irises thrive on is sun. They love sun, they love warmth. They need to be planted where they get the sunniest spot in the garden. But as I say, they will eventually get sort of overcrowded. And the easiest way of lifting them is just to drive a fork into the ground, just away from them to loosen the soil. And this makes life easier. They're quite shallow in rooting systems, and you tend to lift them with clumps, and some will divide. As you lift them, you can see they're ready for it. And just put a sheet on the ground. I always use a fertiliser bag that's been cut open and just throw them on top of that. And don't worry about whether you're going to have a crater. You don't. Somehow it all fills back up. Nature always makes sure of that. So just get there, lift them out. The plants are quite strong. They won't damage them. And go in and say you find a little bit still break off, all sorts will be there. Don't forget the label is very important. And I say you may check them, they may have faded or they may need replacing. So make sure you do that. And this is grown quite close to other shrubs, so you have to be careful not to damage them whilst you're working. And it's quite enjoyable. But I say, for me, the key to the job is look at the weather forecast, wait for a nice dry spell. The soil is dry, it's loose, it's easily workable. You don't want to be lifting heavy soil and treading everywhere and compressing the ground. It's a lovely job. I quite enjoy it. But as I say, 3 years, if possible, 5 years at the maximum. And here we can see part of the clump out of the ground, ready to go. And you've got all sorts in there. And they say this particular clump, Harriet Halloway, I planted it 5 years previously to these pictures being taken. And you can almost see the plants beginning to divide itself. And on the one side, left side, what looks like a little pipe, actually is one of the original roots that were planted and is now ready for snapping off. So we just get going and just jiggle the plants. This is why you want the soil loose and it comes away freely. And you see what's underneath, and slowly but surely it'll be revealed. You never quite know what you're getting, but you can see the dark bit at the front is the old shoot. That's at least 3 years old, and we'll be getting rid of that. And you can see the leaves on the back on fresh young rhizomes that were produced last year and the season before. And what we need is to replant sections like that. So cut away the old piece, and you'll notice on that there are no roots. They've died away, and this is why we do the job this time of the year. It's because the plants have sort of ceased to grow, and in some way they're going to form a suspended animation, and you can do what you want with them. And then what we want to do first is to plant them, because the first roots that the irises will produce are anchor roots, actually lock the plants into the ground. And as we move into the autumn, they'll suddenly put on a growth spurt and they'll start producing feeding roots, and that will take them and build up the rhizomes for next year. But that's a lovely healthy one there. You can see there's a little tempting shoot on the side that you may want to take off. But look at it, there's hardly enough root on it to survive, so just leave it there. The only thing with this one shoot is it's got a flowering spike on it, which we will put to one side. And this is a slightly different specimen. You may be tempted to throw this away and think there's nothing there, but there is. And you can see what looks like a piece of old dry wood. That's one of the original rhizomes that were planted, and that's probably 3 or 4 years old. And you can see it's already dead. The wood lice are crawling all over it, but it's still struggling to survive and producing little rhizomes on the side. Little ones like this we will put in a nursery bed and allow them to pick up for a season or two. Otherwise you will have a bit of a space in the border. You will lose next year's flowers more than likely, so you have to sort of find some way of disguising this emptiness in the border without shadowing the plants. And then it pays to have the groups of irises at different ages within the border themselves to give you that continuity. And it can all be different colours anyway. But you can see there's lovely roots there, but we will trim some of those down. And you can just see little shoots coming out the side, just beyond where my thumb is now. You can see them there. And they will grow and produce a rhizome next year. And just give them the once over. Always tidy up the bit where it's been snapped or where it's been severed from an old plant, cutting back to the young section. And look over it and make sure everything is healthy. And you can see there's a little leaf on the side there that will take off in a while. You've taken that one away, and they've taken a certain amount of rough handling. I've got to be honest. They sort of, they're tough things. They're born to survive. On the other end, we have a little tiddler stuck on the side that's going nowhere. So we will plant that to grow on with it. And that's the sort of ideal sort of plant you can see there that you would want for replanting. You've got a section of young rhizome at the front, you've got a new rhizome about to develop in the back, and you've got young leaves. Some gardeners like to cut the leaves in an arrow shape to resemble the sort of sword-like shape on the leaves themselves, but I don't bother, I just cut them straight across. It doesn't make any difference really. And you shorten them back to about 150 centimetres, 6 inches. And here we have a sort of clump, and you look at it, and this is sort of, I don't know, it's absolutely brimming with young plants. It just needs a bit of tidying up, and hopefully, I'm looking for 3, but to get 3, I would be sort of looking around about 5 or 6. But don't forget, out of shot, we have a pile of iris rhizomes that need looking at, so you end up with an awful lot more than you started off with 3 to 5 years ago. And don't be afraid to pull them about a little bit. I say loosening the soil opens them up a little bit. And you can see the old rhizome in there. I've got my hand over it at the moment, and we'll get rid of that. And there are some little bits, annoying bits that you cut off and trim back. As long as you make a clean cut, they'll recover. And you can see it. And some of them, they almost sort of offer you a choice of where to go for splitting them. And others, you have to just gently tease them away. We've got that rather big, not old rhizome, but it's too, well, we can be choosy. It's just too old for us, so we'll just get rid of that. Trimming over again, never sort of leaving a little snag, and you're always finding little old bits and bits that you can't use, and get rid of them and tidy them up. Keep at it all the time. There's a few more pieces on the floor now. And this one parted itself, you see, it was ready to go, that's it. And sometimes you'll find that the roots are not quite big enough, but these are quite nice, young, and don't be worried if they're about the size of your thumb is plenty big enough. And there's an old piece again, you can see it on the end, and we get rid of that. And it's a flower spike with that one as well. We just tidy that up. And that's all you need to do. If you say you have to do it with all of them, you may end up with a clump that we saw with about 50 or 60. You can give them away to your friends. It's heartbreaking just to see them, put them in the bin or get rid of them. If you let it know you have them, they can go. They can go. People will take them. Neighbours see them growing in your garden and they're quite happy. But you need to do this sort of operation that we've looked at now, at least every 3 years. Definitely don't let it go beyond 5, which is what I did. I did it on the 5th year. And here we are ready to go. Little bit of soil preparation. We've loosened it already, digging them out. We just need to go in and clear away. As I say before, they were growing underneath and alongside other shrubs, so we need to go in and tidy up. And you can see just beyond the end of the fork where my hand is now, that's the original rhizome that I planted in this spot 5 years ago. You can see how much growth that made, and there's the little rotten bits coming out. And as they say, it's still sending up shoots. You can see a couple of shoots on it there, waving around. They're determined to survive. So all we need to do now is clean this piece of ground up to give them a good start. And that really means digging out anything, there's a piece of rhizome there. Get it nice and friable and loose, occasionally treading it down just to keep it firm, not compacted, just firm. You don't want too loose soil. And be careful that you don't go digging or damaging the roots of the surrounding plants. and just keep picking out as much as you can. And as I say, just gently make sure that it sees back there, and not over compacting it. You don't want to be driving your heel in, because we haven't finished the job yet. Give it a little scratch just to spread the soil around. As I say, we've dug all that root growth out, and there's no crater there. Most of it is because the plants actually grow on the surface of the soil or above it. So it's one of those things, as I say, you think you'd end up with something like a quarry there, but it's not. And here we are, just tickling the soil, loosen it up. A little bit more digging just to ease off, and this is where you're always stepping on the border and you compact it. And even this will have young bulbs, corms, and wandering around in it, little strays that have come in, and we'll just put them to one side, and when we finish the job, round them up and put them in. So you can see we are ready to go now with adding a little bit of fertiliser, and this is bone meal. You could use superphosphate if you want, but I'm organic, and all that does is to encourage root development, which we've already established is the important thing with planting irises or replanting irises, is you want to give those new anchor roots the best start in life. So it's about 100 grams to a square metre, 2 ounces or so to a square metre, and just slowly just tickle it into the surface, work it in. There we are. And it's not too strong, it won't damage your roots when they begin to grow, and it will break down. It may attract a few mice, but you're not going to eat it all. So there we are, as I say, make sure. You can see the ground is nice and dry and friable. I've seen irises growing literally in stone dust alongside roads in baking heat, and they take it. They're a wonderful plant. If you've got a hot spot in the garden, give it to the irises every time. It doesn't mean that they'll thrive on neglect, far from it, but they like to be appreciated, shall we say. And here are the ones that we've sorted and divided earlier on. As I say, I just cut them straight across. There's half a bucket of water there, and you just drop the roots in there just to keep them plump. If they shriveled and dropped off, they'd still produce fresh roots. And all you can do is cut straight across the top of the secateurs, and that's it done. So now we're actually getting on with the replanting of these fresh rhizomes. And as I say, the ones that we've picked out from all the ones that we saw there, and you can see the difference with the ones in my hand to the ones on the right hand side of the image that need to be prepared. And the first job you do is to shorten back the roots to about 5 centimeters, 2 inches. Just cut them back with the secateurs. You won't harm them. As I say, they're ready to produce roots now, so that's a main principle. And you'd be surprised. Now, this is a south-facing spot in open sun. Make a little shallow scrape and just drop them in, and have root appear just above the surface. As I say, they grow more above the surface than under it, and that's all that you need to do. And believe it or not, in a couple of weeks' time, that leaf section will be pulled up at right angles to the soil. Once the anchoring roots develop, they pull the soil up and they sort themselves out. The birds will get attracted to the dry soil and may start distant bathing in it and knocking them about, but they survive all of that. You just need, to keep a check every day, see how they're going, make sure that they're not suffering in any way, and the rest is they take care of themselves. You can water them in with a rose on the watering can just to keep a little bit of moisture above the surface, but generally speaking, I just do this, let them go. If there's a bit of showery weather around, it does help, and that's all that you have to do. And those will grow, and I say once again, I won't let it go so long next time, but in another 3 years' time, we'll be at the game and getting them out. And this is the one that we were growing, Harriet Holloway, and I've included a section here, Desert Song, of ones that I've grown. I think they're wonderful things. They bridge the period between the bulbs going over. You have the alliums out in the garden and the bulk of the flowering border coming in, and there's lilies and peonies to come after these. And as I say, if you look in the catalogues, look on the website for bearded iris, Iris germanica, there's hundreds to pick from, and they're so easy and so obliging to grow. and it's a nice cheerful yellow to finish with. Diolch, and thank you for watching. Goodbye for now, but if you would like to see any more, please hit the subscribe and like buttons.